Do you want to learn more about something called RAID, but you don't want to invest a lot of hardware to do it? Well, stay tuned, and I'm going to show you a couple of ways to get this done. Welcome to another edition of Tech Bites with Ron Nutter, your home for all things relating to smart home technology. In this episode, we're going to talk about learning about how to set up your own home RAID lab without spending a lot of money. Hi, I'm Ron Nutter, and we're going to be working on this together. This content is also available as an Amazon Flash briefing or podcast. Please go to techbiteswithronnutter.com for more information. For any items mentioned in this episode, there are affiliate links in the description. If you click on these links, I will get a small commission, but that won't affect the price you pay for the item. If you want to get notified when new content is uploaded, please click on subscribe and enable notifications. Now here's what we're going to be talking about in this video, and that's how to set up RAID without spending a lot of money, and especially while you're setting up a RAID lab to learn about the difference. We'll talk about the different kinds or different levels of RAID. We'll talk about the required items you're going to need to have, implementing the different RAID levels, and we may even look at how to simulate failures to see what you can anticipate being done. Now, we're going to show this with both Windows and Linux. I'm going to start off with Windows first, and then we'll do Linux in a follow-up video. Setting up the different kinds of RAIDs really is not that hard, depending in part on the system that you're working with, but some of the terminology may be a little different, and that's where this is going to be done over several videos because RAID can be rather in-depth, but I'm going to get you to a point you're familiar with the different levels of RAID, what best may work out for you, and that's going to be an individual decision for everybody, and then showing you kind of how to get started so that when you go to implementing a NAS where you're going to have different kinds of RAID potentially available, that you're able to decide which one is best for you. Let's go ahead and shift over here to some things I've drawn up, and these are general statements. If you've done RAID before, then this really, you won't probably get a lot out of this video. But if you're not familiar with some of the terms, let's step through some of these, and then we'll take things one step at a time. Now, RAID 0 is the one that you potentially can start out with. RAID 0 is basically, it's the fastest write process of any of them as a general rule, and with anything you're always going to have some varieties. The downside of this, you're striping across drives, so you can have multiple hard drives and you're writing across the different ones that you've got in that RAID set, but the downside is if one of those drives goes out, you're dead, you've lost all your data, not just the one on that drive. That's where looking at something like RAID 1. Now this is going to be a one-to-one relationship as a general rule. So if you have a 1 terabyte drive, you're going to have a mirror that's another 1 terabyte drive. So if one of the drives goes out, and it doesn't matter which one, then your other drive is still up and running. You've got time to get it replaced. You may have to take whatever system you're using for your NAS down to change the drive out, unless you've got hot swap, which will allow you to change it online. But the thing is, you're writing to both drives at the same time, so it may be a little bit slower. Again, these are generalities. You're going to have to benchmark your own system. RAID 5 is where you start seeing some degree of protection, and that's going to be a minimum of 3 drives. Off the top, you've got a 33% overhead because you can have one drive fail, and that's where parity is going to be striping across either all 3 drives or be residing on that one drive, again, depending on the system you got. There's always going to be exceptions. So before some of you start sending me a bunch of mail that I'm wrong, there are varieties. What I'll be showing you initially is software RAID, and that's where you can do with the computer that you've got. There is hardware RAID available, but that's typically more expensive because you're going to have a dedicated controller, which used will probably be a minimum of $600 to $700, more likely several thousand. And the more feature functionalities you want, like with hot spares and whatnot, that's going to increase the price of the drive. So a hot spare is handy because as soon as you have a drive failure detected, it immediately switches over to the hot spare, brings it into the RAID set, and starts rebuilding it. So your exposure is going to be minimal. RAID 10 is, or you can think of this as RAID 1 plus 0, is a combination of 2 different RAID. You will have, say if you've got two 2 terabyte drives in a RAID 0 set, you're going to have a second set of 2 2 terabyte drives, and then you will mirror those against each other. So remember where I said that in RAID 0, if you have a drive fail, you've lost that complete set. Well, in this case with RAID 10 or RAID 1 plus 0, that's a yeah, but. Yes, you lose the data on one set of the mirrored drives, but that other set is still up and running. So you've got the ability to go in and change that out, and it will remirror that when it sees the companion part of the mirror come back online. Now, it's got a higher drive cost because of the mirroring. Depending on the dynamics of your situation where you've got to have the absolute fastest write speed, then this may be something to look at. But these are all just generalities. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with RAID 0 and then go to RAID 1. And that's going to be quite a bit to digest in this video. And at that point, we'll follow up in a later video in part because I've got to go order some more drives, that you can see about RAID 5 and RAID 10 to kind of get an idea of what's going on and what things may look like when there is a failure. I was a little remiss in not showing you what I'm going to be working with. Now, initially for Windows, I'm going to be using 320 gig 2.5 SATA drive, and then I'm going to use a Sabrent SATA to USB. That's the easiest way that I found to do it, minimal cost. You know, this is going to be less than $20, and this is going to be about $10, $15, depending on what the prices are on Amazon at any given point. This will get you started before you start investing the money in larger drives or building an Unraid or TrueNAS, or you pick the system. But the purpose of this series of videos is to help you understand the different versions of RAID so that when you start seeing the terminology pop up, you'll have a better understanding of how to apply what's going to work for you. So let's shift over here to our Intel NUC, and I'm going to plug in the first drive. First, I got to plug in the little adapter, and then let's go to this computer, and you can see it as they come online. So we'll plug the first one in, and the drive's spinning up, so it should show up here in just a second. Let's go ahead and shift over here, and we will go to manage, because depending on the condition I left this drive, you may not see it. So we'll go disk management. It's already there. It's unallocated. That's why it didn't show up on Windows, and that's my bad. When you first get a drive, and let's plug the second one in, and then you'll have an idea of probably what should happen for you, because most of these are usually pre-formatted and pre-partitioned when you get them. Okay, so we've got the second drive plugged in, so we should see something here momentarily when it comes up. So it says unknown, not initialized. Okay, so these both came up unallocated. That's fine. If they were looking something like this, where you see an NTFS or FAT32 partition, you need to undo that first, because you can't get the drives striped or mirrored when they've already got partition information on them. So we'll right click, we will go a striped volume, and we'll click next, and see disk 3 it already sees as a match. We'll click that, click add, and then we'll click next, assign it a drive letter, and we'll say NTFS, because that's the size drive you probably will want to. And they're going to be dynamic disks. Okay, that's fine. Operation not supported by the object. Okay, well, what should have let us do it was something that it didn't like. So now we'll go over here to storage spaces. And this is something within Windows 10 they've done that I'm not necessarily a fan of, because we should have been able to do it the other way. So if we click on create a pool, and see by default, it's already found those two drives because they're ready to go. So we'll click on pool. We'll just leave it at storage space, drive D. We want simple, because at this point we want it to be a striped drive. So at that point, you see we're getting maximum space out. So we can click on create storage space, and it's going to format it, and then it comes up as drive D. Now we're going to get a little bit of information copied over there, because we want to have something in there to work with. So we get that moved over, and it should move over fairly quick. We're running everything on a little Intel NUC that's not doing much of anything else. Okay, so that's all there. Well, to work with RAID 1, we'll have to go, for the case of Windows 10, we've got to go back into the pool, and we're going to create a pool, and we want it mirrored. Okay, so that's good. Where before we had no resiliency, now we're going to go to two-way mirror. So they're changing the terminology. So you can even do RAID 5, and that's where you get into parity. So two-way mirror, and so you notice our capacity drops down. So if you look down here and we go back to simple no resiliency, we've got full capacity minus about a gig for some small overhead apparently they like to put in. So if we go to two-way mirror, then it's going to write to both drives, and then we'll create storage space. So we'll really only see the one drive. They've made this, well, Microsoft thinks they've made it a little bit easier. I have a tendency to stick with what works. So let's go through here. We'll copy some files back over. And at this point, of course, it's writing to both drives. Okay, so we've got that. Unplug a drive to somebody drive. It's not a good way to do it, but it's at least a way we can do it. And let's run the Unraid installer. Okay, so it's running. It thinks it's happy, and I can see activity from the other drive. Now, if we go up here See, now it's warned us reduced resiliency. So we've now have that to warning, but at least we're up and running. I'm a little more comfortable with that. The RAID 0 that's something we'll have to do a little more digging on. So I'm going to plug the drive back in and we'll see what kind of remirroring, or the term I've been hearing used lately with some folks is resilvering. So it thinks it's okay, and it's checking the drives now, and apparently it's happy. Okay, so now there's the part where this gets to, it rebuilds the mirror or resilvers, and I'm not quite sure why everybody went to resilver. So this is going to be a period of time when your secondary drive is not going to be totally there, but you at least are up and running on one drive. If you're watching this on YouTube, you will see videos on the screen that are similar to the one you've just watched, or other content that YouTube thinks you might be interested in. If this video helps you or provides value, please click on that like button, thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please click on subscribe and enable notifications. See you in the next episode. Thanks for watching.